Hey everybody, I'm Brooke and I sobered up August 2nd, 2016.
Hi friends, I'm Suzanne and I sobered up December 19th, 1991.
Together we got a lot of recovery and we host Seek Purpose, the podcast.
Seek Purpose is a community that supports recovery, healing, and spiritual growth.
We believe that sharing our stories can greatly impact our communities and collective action can impact the world.
So stop scrolling and start listening, will ya?
Hey everybody, I'm Brooke.
Hi friends, I'm Suzanne.
And this is Seek Purpose, the podcast. We are really excited today. We have a very special guest and fellow podcaster, Jean from the Bubble Hour and Unpickled the Blog is here to share her story with us. So Jean, would you love to introduce yourself to our audience?
Hi, well, thanks for having me. It's great to be here. I love what you're doing. And I'm grateful that there's people like you doing this out there because this is the kind of thing that helped me get sober 9 years ago. I was trying to quit drinking, and I just could not get 24 hours under my belt. Every day was Groundhog Day. And I did eventually find my way, and I started blogging. That was the tool that I used for accountability. And that just so happened timing-wise to be in 2011 when blogs, recovery blogs in particular, were really about to explode. And people were really starting to turn to the internet during that investigation stage of recovery, the stages of change, when we're starting to think about, should I make a change? So people were stumbling across blogs like mine and making connections, and that helped me. Telling my story helped me, and helping other people helped me. And so I blogged for a while and still do, and I got involved after a few years with a podcast called The Bubble Hour, which was being run by a few women in the Boston area. And that's a funny story I can share with you today if you want. But anyway, somehow this girl from Alberta got involved in the Bubble Hour, and over time, it sort of ran its course for different members that were doing it, and I ended up taking it over on my own in 2016. So we now have 300, I think, or so episodes, and every week I upload another interview, another story. But for myself, I'm 52 and I've been married for 30 years, and I have 3 children that are grown and married, and 3 grandchildren, if you can believe it. And just my life is so good and so full. I'm so happy to be sober and just fully present for all of it.
Us grandmas.
Yay! Sweet gig.
Making a voice for the grandmas out there in recovery. I love it. Reading your story and your blogs and listening to it, I was just so excited to have you on and sharing your story, especially how you were saying that this is the way that you sobered up, and with today's times, especially with what's been going on in our world, how many people are turning to this, and to be able to see and hear a story of someone who's really taken their recovery and continued long-term recovery from this basis is really important. Bring some great hope to some of our listeners out there. So thanks for coming. I can't wait to get into your story.
Mm-hmm. Thanks. Yeah, I'm glad to be here. And it's interesting for my own perspective too, because I am able to look back sometimes on things that I wrote over the years, and I don't necessarily still feel that way. I'm not sometimes proud of things that I wrote because, you're early on, man, just so full of ego and so many layers that needed to be peeled back. And there's part of me that wants to go back and delete them. And I think it's really important to leave them and to own it, and to even just to be able to look back and see how much I've changed and grown and healed over the years. And so that's quite remarkable just for my own sake to have it as a touchstone too.
Mm-hmm. I totally agree. There's just definitely things in the past that we're not supposed to have any regrets over things. But being in recovery, and I'm sure you can relate, meeting many people in recovery at their different stages, there is stages, which actually defines why this is a disease called alcoholism, because it's recognizable about the way we act in our drinking, that it doesn't matter if it's a man, a woman, or child, in a sense nowadays, right? With so many young people getting, contracting this alcoholism. and addiction, it still looks the same. But when we get into recovery, the same thing happens. We all go through those levels, like you were saying, of ego and pride and, you know, all those different things. And I think it is important that those stories continue to lay as they are. So I appreciate you humbling yourself and keeping them there, because we need to hear those, right?
Yeah.
We need to see that and see the growth. If I didn't see the growth, I wouldn't still be here.
Yeah, that's so true. That's the beauty of it. And I think in the beginning, I wanted to be fixed. I wanted to be done and fixed. And I thought maybe it would just take a few months. And then at some point, I realized it's about the process and the growth, and that hopefully never ends. I hope I'm 90 years old and still learning new things about myself and still becoming a better person every day. That would be great. I would really like to know that lady. So I look forward to that.
I love that so much. And I feel like leaving that up and letting people see that you're evolving and changing and growing allows them to feel safe to do the same, to not feel like they have to be fixed right away, and that like things are going to come with time and everything's going to change. It's really cool. I'm really happy that you leave that up there for us to see the change in you.
Oh, thanks for saying that, because it's pretty vulnerable, to be honest. I think I I guess it's warts and all, right? That and I'm not anonymous. That's the other thing, is that when I started writing, at first I was anonymous, and then eventually I thought I'm going to add my picture, because it seemed like I was always looking for, you know, they would have like sober celebrities, and we all would just be like looking, what do they look like? Can I look in their eyes? What can I see? And so eventually I added my picture, and then I started writing for a website, and then I started using my full name. And then I released a book last year, and just over time I just decided, you know, I was okay with coming out of the shadows a little bit, because I don't feel like everybody needs to do that. I respect all perspectives on anonymity, and I think it's really important to embrace anonymity, particularly early on. But I just felt like for me it was a fit to step forward and connect with people and just put myself out there. And I was really scared, and nothing bad has ever come of it so far. So knock wood. But it has really been a really lovely thing.
It's been a topic that actually is obviously even more so being discussed now, is just that, is anonymity, and for myself as well. And to this day, you know, I won't publicly come out and share kind of the resources that I use specifically, because there is certain programs out there that do want us to stay, you know, respectful in that regard. But, you know, as far as us, even people coming forward and saying, hi, I have alcoholism, or I have cancer, or I have diabetes, I think that's what's helped me coming out of that old school mentality into the now, is saying it's okay for me to own who, you know, I am, and what I have. It's just as far as other details to protect other people that are wanting to keep things, you know, respectful of our communities, of other people. It's important for me to not publicly broadcast my support choice in some areas, you know. In other areas I do speak of it.
I totally understand and respect that. And I think because I didn't get sober in a program, I sort of pieced together my own way through. I just muddled through. And it took a while for me to understand that, the purpose of it. And once I did, I really respected it and understood why that's important to people. And I think that it's such an individual choice, you know, whether or not to be anonymous, and then understanding why that choice is there. Like, I think sometimes there's people that are fiercely anonymous, and they're not sure why. And I always think it helps to know why you're doing it, and how it's going to help you. And I feel like we do everything mindfully when we walk this walk. So that's one of those choices, that we need to know why we're doing it and how it serves us. And for those that choose not to, how they can do that without infringing on someone else's decision too. So I really think too, it's important not to be a spokesperson for a particular program. And I think that's a big part of why certain programs ask for anonymity to be respected as well, too, because they really don't want a poster child for the program. I don't think that's a lot to put on anyone's shoulders. And especially in a disease that comes back notoriously.
Well said.
Yeah.
Definitely. Well, we would love to hear your story. That's something that our listeners are really needing to hear is when did you first know that there was a problem with in your life with alcohol?
I think first, let me say, I grew up knowing from the time I was little that my dad was in recovery. When I was 5, I'm the youngest of 3 girls, and one of the big girls, that's what I call my older sisters, one of the big girls said, Dad's an alcoholic. And I remember saying to him, Daddy, she says you're an alcoholic. You're not an alcoholic, because I'd never seen him have a drink. And he said, oh, well, and he explained to me, well, he'd gotten sober when he was 23. And so before he was even married, he was sober. And so that meant that he didn't drink, because once you're an alcoholic, then you can never drink. So this was a truth that I grew up with, was that alcoholics can never drink if they're sober. And so that was just sort of demonstrated for me. But he wasn't active in a program anymore. And but he did go his whole life. I never ever saw my dad take a drink. And so that was something that I feel like I'm so grateful for, because whatever imperfections my dad had, and every parent does have some imperfections, he definitely gave me a huge gift in that regard. Now, it didn't stop me from going out and earning my own merit badge, but it did give me a good foundation. So I think I was a fairly normal drinker until I hit my 30s. But I also can look back and see how the pieces were in place, just that it was a problem waiting to happen, because I definitely had an eating disorder when I was younger. I have some OCD behaviors that are anxiety related, and just was very other focused, very worried about what other people thought, to the point where didn't even care what I thought. That sounds like it doesn't have much to do with alcohol, but as it turned out, as I learned down the road, it did. When alcohol really started going into the trouble zone for me was when I was in my 30s. My husband and I own a business, and we have 3 children at that stage, and life was busy, 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 and I was going 100 miles an hour all day. And I discovered that if I had a nice big glass of wine before bed, it would send me off to sleep in a hurry, and then I could get up the next day and go 100 miles an hour day, 100 miles an hour all day. And I said it was like the brick that I put on my head at the end of the day. And it works, and it works until it doesn't work anymore. And then I found that it didn't just put me to sleep, it also really helped with anxiety. And it was nice to not just have it at bedtime, it was nice to have it at dinner. And over the course of a decade, but the end stages, I would be at my desk at the office at 2 in the afternoon and think, nope, we're not going to drink today. We're not going to have wine after work today. And then I'd think, oh, but we made a big sale, so I should celebrate. We should have wine with dinner. And then I'd think, well, I can't go to that liquor store because I was there last time, so I've got to go to another one. And I would just start playing these games in my head. But every morning I was waking up and saying, today is going to be different. Today's the day I'm going to quit. I can feel it. Today's going to be the day. But by the afternoon, I was having that bargaining session with myself. And then, I'd leave work, and instead of turning right to go home, I'd turn left to go to the store. And I just would feel defeat in my body because I knew it was not going to be the day. And that just continued for years. I tried all of the bargaining that we do with ourselves. I tried to get my husband in on it and say, we're really drinking too much. And I mean, because I was pouring him drinks when he'd walk in the door, as if it was my first, oh, here, let's have a drink. But it was, I'd had a few by then already. So he, being a normie, would say, oh, okay, well then let's just cut back. Let's only have it on the weekends. And then he would be able to do that and I wouldn't. And that was starting to show me that there was something different there between him and I. And so I think I just had a lot of these little light bulb moments of like, I can't get this. And then it's almost like, when you're trying to lose weight, I don't know if you guys go through this, but, I think, oh, I'm going to lose weight by bathing suit season. And then bathing suit season comes and somehow I'm 10 pounds heavier. So I felt like that. I was like, I'm trying to quit and I'm drinking more. This is like not just not happening, it's getting worse. And I had a friend who lived down the road for me, and she would walk over every evening, and we would have a glass of wine and a visit. And I saw her approaching down the street, and I knew I didn't have enough wine for more than one glass each, and I knew I needed at least 2 glasses to get to sleep. And I quickly ran and put the kettle on and made tea. And when she got there, I shoved this mug of tea in her hand and said, like, oh, I made us tea, because I didn't want her to drink my wine. And I knew then I was like, that's not right. There's something funny about that. So I had all of these little sort of red flag moments and little pings and tings. But meanwhile, no one knew. And my days were becoming more and more frenzied, I would say. I was really addicted to approval and awards and achievement, and feeling just very frenzied of wanting to somehow compensate for this growing secret in my life. And so, as I mentioned, I have anxiety and OCD. That was getting worse because those things are magnified with alcohol. Like I said, it worked at first, but in the end, it made it worse. And I wanted it. I wanted. I wish it had been anything but alcohol. I would have changed anything else about my life, but I really wanted to not give up that piece of it because it felt like it was mine and it was working. And the moment I knew that it was time to quit was very inconvenient. I was at a gala dinner. I was hosting a table of women. It was a YWCA Women of Distinction Awards dinner. And I had actually been a previous recipient of that award. And so that makes you kind of an ambassador of the award. So I brought this table of women to this event, and we were all there was wine on the table, and there was a motivational speaker. And the motivational speaker had said, okay, everyone, now I want you to close your eyes and think of something that's a big dream of yours. Think of a big goal. And I closed my eyes, and I thought, I knew I had a dream that I wanted to hike Machu Picchu one day. And so I thought, okay, Machu Picchu. So I closed my eyes, and you guys, I felt it was like a hand came down from the ceiling and slapped me on the chest. And I heard myself say, I need to quit drinking. And oh gosh, it moves me to this day because that moment was like such a God shot. But I was at this fancy dinner with all these women, and there was wine on the table, and there was wine in my glass, and it was so real to me that I opened my eyes and gasped because I thought I might have said it out loud. I thought I might have shouted it, actually. So I looked around this table to see if anyone heard me, but they were all obedient women who had their eyes closed, and they were all thinking of their goal. So I thought, okay, wait, it's okay. I can Machu Picchu, like, never mind this not drinking stuff. Machu Picchu. So I closed my eyes again, and I heard it again. I need to quit drinking. And then I had this like urgency in my body that I've really never experienced since. But the way I describe it is that if you were standing by a highway, a freeway, and you saw a puppy wander out in front of a vehicle, and you leaped to save that puppy, and you were frozen in midair, you know that feeling of like, and then freeze frame. That's how my body felt. It was like I had this leap to save myself, this urgency to save my own life, but I couldn't do anything about it. I felt like I couldn't because I was in the middle of an event, and I had a glass of wine, and goodness knew that I couldn't not finish the partial glass that was in front of me. So I actually walked around with that feeling in my chest for 2 days before I really knew that I was done. It was time. I was done. And I think that awareness that I had was that I was killing myself, and that yes, it was true that nobody really knew. My children, my husband didn't know how much I was drinking. People didn't know how much I was struggling, but I knew it was getting worse. And I knew what happens to people who die of alcoholism. And I know that a lot happens between where I was and and death. A lot of bad stuff happens, and I didn't want to go through that. And it just occurred to me, I can just stop this now. I don't have to hit a bottom. I don't have to get worse than this. I'm I can just stop now and save myself right now, because this is going to kill me. This is the trajectory I'm on. And that was when I stopped. That was March 20th, 2011. And I did another thing that day. That motivational speaker, part of her story had been that she wrote a blog for her mother's 90th birthday. Her gift to her mother was that every day she wrote a blog post about her mother. And she told the story about how her mother said she was reading it, but she could tell her mother wasn't reading it because the stats kept showing 0. And then one day her mother did start reading it, and she told about how their relationship blossomed as a result of her mother reading these posts. And at the end of the year, she published a little book with all of these things that she'd written about her mother in it. And I thought, I'm going to do that with sobriety. I'm going to write a little bit every day about getting sober. And if I see one person has read it, then I'll know one person saw me, because I, like I said, very focused on other people, needed other people to validate me. So if one person read it and validated me, that would keep me accountable. That was the missing link, was someone to keep me accountable. Now, the point is not lost on me that I could have walked into a meeting and had support and accountability. And I look back and wished I had done it that way, but I was really just too scared. So anyway, I started blogging, and that someone did stumble upon it. It might have been a bot, I don't know. And then somebody then commented and said, good for you, good luck, keep going. And that just got me through one more day. And after a while, then there was comments that said, I'm on my first day and you're helping me. And then, oh my gosh, service, we know what service does, but I didn't know that. So that was a fireworks moment for me. Oh my gosh, now I'm helping someone else. Now I really have to keep going. And it got better and better. It's just amazing. So that's how the ball got rolling for me. And just the connections that I've made online, in person, in my community, around the world, actually, as a result of my involvement in podcasting and blogging, have just been phenomenal. And I'll tell you what I've learned. We're all the same. We are just all the same. And there's beauty in all of us, and there's brokenness in all of us. And I somehow just thought that there was something especially wrong with me. And that's common too. And it was just really, really nice to find out that no, we're just all human, and that's okay. So
Wow. I just want to point out a couple of things that I really love about your story. Is one, that you were saying, like, you don't have to hit a bottom to get help if you know that you have a problem, and that alcoholism doesn't necessarily look like you have a brown paper bag underneath a bridge. Like, it's when you feel like you need it to go to sleep, you need it to relax, you need it to calm your anxiety, and you can't go without it even though you want to, like, that's when you can start getting help, as soon as you have an awareness of that. So I really want to just reiterate that point, because I think that's so important for people. And I know there's going to be a lot of people that relate to that story.
yeah, it's surprising too. Like it surprised me. And I think because I had never listened to other people's stories, I didn't know that was a thing. I mean, I just only knew the dramatic things that we see in movies and TV. And it's dramatic for a reason. I mean, that it's heightened reality when you see it on TV. The truth is that meetings are just full of just all walks of life, and there is no typical, is there? Like, there really is no typical. And even I also really, I think I applied a lot of shame to it, because I really, as I said, being hooked on validation and approval from other people, when I read Brene Brown's work, she talks about shame identities and how when we're growing up, our parents sometimes train us with shame identities. So being uh, growing up in the 70s, being a good housekeeper was really important to my grandmother and my mother. And so in my family, it was a shame identity to not be a good housekeeper. That was really bad. And um, so I sort of had this list of things in my head that made me good and that made me bad. And what you don't realize is if you have those beliefs about yourself, you also have them about other people. So I thought I was just a really nice lady and that I had that I was nice to everybody. But the truth was I was just as judgmental of everyone else as I was of myself, because how could I not be? I was seeing the world through those glasses. And recovery for me has really been about backing up the truck and undoing some of those beliefs and realizing that the person that is on the park bench or under a bridge, that I don't have to push away from them in shame. I can reach towards them in compassion and realize that they're as much me as I am them. And that was a really wonderful realization, a freeing notion, really, because I think that was part of why I was a little bit scared to go into any type of a program, was because I was afraid of who I would find in those rooms. I was afraid, first of all, my biggest fear was that I would be told, you're not bad enough yet. You don't belong here. You're not bad enough. And so I was embarrassed of how much I drank, and I was embarrassed that I didn't drink enough, if that makes any sense at all.
Totally.
Oh, yes.
When you have no sense of self, when you're only relying on other people telling you who you are, when you're living your life as a complete shapeshifter, people pleaser, you're always trying to guess what people want, right? And so you take the temperature, you walk in the room and you take the temperature, and maybe you notice that my vocabulary, I better dumb it down a little bit. They might not like me if I act too smart, or, oh, I need to be funny in this group. Well, I didn't know what the temperature was going to be in that room. I was making assumptions, and they were completely wrong. But I love that I really learned that in the long run, that not only do I need to not worry about the judgments of others. You think you're being judged because you judge others. That's what I learned, is that because I thought that was normal, and it doesn't have to be normal. I get to decide what normal is now. So normal for me now is kind and open-minded, I would say, and it's still a new awareness to me that I might just be okay just as I am. I could just walk in and not have to try to hit the right notes and and do things right. I could just be me, and I could take it or leave it.
Do you find a lot of the recovery programs, of course, out there has the ability to get from that type of old thinking into the new thinking is really based around having a spiritual connection that is with a power through a God that loves us unconditionally and loves us the way we are, all flawed and all, which helps for myself. It helps me kind of get through and know that I am a strong, confident woman that's loved, and what other people think is not my business. It's kind of really simple that way. Is there something that you had to help you transition as far as spiritually? Did you use that, or how did you go from that thinking? From
Yeah, what's funny, Suzanne, is that I was always a really religious person, and I minored in theology in university. So I was a pretty churchy person to begin with, and I could intellectualize that I believed in a loving presence. And my feeling was that I didn't feel powerless. I felt like I had an iota of power left in me, and I called on my faith, the way that I would define it myself, to bring that forward. And that's how it came about for me. I feel like for a lot of people that go into a program that has a spiritual component and they've never experienced that before or never felt the power of it, it's such an awakening that it's transformational. Um, I've always felt that I think it was a little bit curious to me that I didn't feel like I needed. I felt a little cheeky about that. Like I felt like I got it. I got that part. So I don't need that part. Um, I really think what made a big difference for me was therapy. And that helped me unpack what was holding me back from tapping into that particular power. There are abstinence-based recovery programs that don't have a spiritual component at all, and they work really well for people that are really resistant to that, or for whatever reason, some people have trauma around it. They want to keep that out of their recovery. So I think Smart Recovery is a good example of that. That's really based on cognitive behavioral therapy, and but it's still abstinence based and still about changed behaviors and changed thinking. So I've seen people do really well with that too. I think I don't know. It is really the secret sauce for a lot of people's recovery. It really is. It really does change the way people feel inside. I think in unexpected ways sometimes. But I don't know. It's funny. I feel like this is something I could think on a lot about myself, because I definitely it wasn't a light bulb moment for me at all. But it's such an important part of our growth as people, I think.
Mm. It's beautiful. I love the way you talk about the open mind and how important it is to, have an open mind, because without that, we can't have anything coming in. And, so much has happened. And I'm sure from your experience with the bubble hour of, doing podcasts and hearing how others are doing, how they're staying clean, how they're staying sober. And there is such a colorful experience out there that has been successful for many people. And if we sit in a box thinking it's just this, like I was very much, it's just this way, it's just this way. But seeing some really great success. And, that's what I just love about what we're doing here and hearing all these stories of recovery. I mean, if it's focusing on the good, which I believe all recovery programs, wherever you're doing, is for us to be better people without drinking. And keeping that the focus is really awesome.
I have a belief if I can jump in on that, then I have a belief that the earlier we stop addiction in its trajectory, the more choices we have. And I think that when someone gets quite far into addiction, a really rigid program often works best for them. I think when you're earlier in your trajectory, you might be able to be a little bit more loosey-goosey, like what I was, and take a little bit of this and a little bit of that. And I read about a lot of different programs and tried them all out. And sometimes we talk about that as being patchwork recovery, because we're sort of choosing patches from different things and building our own mosaic of recovery. But I do feel that there are definitely some people who do best with the rigidity and this is the only way for you. I think there's some people that really need that, and so it's funny that to be open-minded and say, I embrace all forms of recovery, is also to say, including people that really believe and need to stay focused on only one way. So it's kind of it's taken me a while to get there, because most of us love the way that we recovered and we want that to be the way everybody does. But really what we want is for everyone to be free and healthy and wholehearted.
Yeah, that is the goal. We want that freedom, like you're saying, freedom from validation and from needing outside things. I also love how you touched on it's like more about removing the behaviors and the thoughts and the way you are, so that you can tap into that spirituality and that power that you're missing. And it's not about like doing more or getting something or anything outside of yourself. It's like, no, I got to undo and just let that in.
Yeah, exactly.
And the big thing that you brought up as well, which is something that I definitely recommend, because we're just a couple moms here that have gotten recovery, but I certainly don't claim myself as being a professional by any means of the imagination. And a big part of the core healing that happened for me as well, and many people that I'm connected with in recovery, is therapy and getting that professional help. And I think that really needs to be said out there for people who are coming into these programs, which are wonderful programs that are very, focused on what they do. But on the same note, having a combination of getting that outside help to be able to heal those real dark places is essential. For me, it was essential. There's no way that I would have been able to stay sober just on what I was doing with the program that I was involved with just the program. I needed intense outside help for many years. And there's no shame in that at all, because I think some people in recovery are going through some of the programs and thinking, why the hell am I feeling like I am? And I'm X amount of years sober and I'm still hurting, and I'm still, I've done everything that this is happening, but there's still stuff in there. And a professional can get us into those places. How are you feeling about that? Sounds like that was part of your story as well.
Yeah, it was a big part of my story, and I love therapy. I wish therapy was free. I wish it was required. I think everybody would just do so well to just go and learn about themselves, learn about that inner landscape, because we're all taught things from childhood, not only taught by our parents, but that the way we interpret them, that we think are true, and we carry them forth into our adult years. So example, my brother-in-law, after it rains, that beautiful smell after it rains, my brother-in-law thought that smell was worms. So he thought that wasn't a good smell. So there's a childhood belief. No one ever told him that. He just thought of that as a little kid. And we were like 25 or something, and he was like, oh, it smells like worms out here. We're like, what are you talking about? That's the beautiful smell of fresh rain. But it was an old belief that was completely wrong and that he carried forward. A fellow I interviewed earlier this year said that he was 5 when his father died, and someone came up to him at the funeral and said, well, looks like you're going to be the man of the family now. And he said he ran and cried secretly because he was so ashamed, because he didn't know how to drive the tractor. And he, at 5 years old, took on all of this worry that he had to be the man of the house for his mom. And he said no one knew the worries that he had trying to figure out all of the things his dad used to do that he now thought he needed to know how to do. So there's things that we do to ourselves as kids that get stuck in us, right? And like I said, my feeling that my house always had to be perfect. Nobody ever said that to me, but I grew up hearing, the women in my family discussing over tea how, Lucy Magoo's house down the street is a bit of a pigsty, and Roger that message received, right? Little Jean heard that and like, don't want anyone to talk about me that way, so got it. And all of that stuff is way in us. We don't even know we think that way. And so therapy can really help us back it up and back it up. Where did you get that idea? Why do you think you have to be that way? Why do you think you have to do that? Where did that come from? Is that true? Is that true? Is that true? And it's very hard to do that on our own. And another thing I discussed in therapy that was a new term to me was the family contract. So we really looked at our families of origin. What's the family contract in your household? What's the relationship? What do you all agree to without agreeing to anything? What were the silent things that you knew you did? The jokes that you laughed at, the way you conducted yourself, the way that you deferred maybe to one parent or one sibling, or just the things that were normal in your house that were not necessarily, you just interpreted them as being essential and having some basis or some purpose. And so therapy can really help us decide if we really want to carry that forward and if it's serving us. And that's hard to do on your own.
I love the analogy that kind of goes along with this of the little girl watching her mom cook, and her mom always cut the sides off of the ham before she put it in the oven. And one day she asked her mom, like, why do you cut the sides off the ham? And she's like, oh, I don't know. My mom used to do it. So she goes to her mom and she's like, why did you do that? She's like, oh, I don't know. My mom used to do it. So she goes to grandma and she's like, why did you do this? She's like, because the oven was small. So they've been doing this and missing out on the best piece of the ham.
That's great.
Yeah.
That really sums it up, doesn't it?
Yeah.
I love the giggles. I really want to hear a little bit about this part of your story as well in the now, because a big part of your journey into recovery was that strong man, your father, really taking away a little bit of the shame of being an alcoholic and planting that in such a young age with you. How are you doing that today with your family? And explaining it now? You have grandkids, us grandmas, like how are you bringing this topic into your home on an everyday basis?
So it's really funny that my family doesn't read my blog or listen to my podcast at all. I told them that they could, they're welcome to. And I have been really careful that I don't write about my family. I don't, even though I'm not anonymous, and if you really wanted to, you could figure out my children's names and, see my husband's pictures online or something, but I don't write about them. So I've told them, I created this blog and told my truth, but I really wrote it so that it would never be embarrassing for you to read. If you want to read it, you can. It's all there for you. And they all decided not to. I think they've looked at it once, but they really haven't. I was about 10 days sober when I told my husband that I had quit drinking. I hid my drinking from him, and I hid my first 10 days of sobriety from him. And then when I told him about it, and like I said, he didn't know I'd been struggling, I showed him my blog and I said, okay, well, here's 10 days of writing that I've done explaining what it's been like for me. And so he sat and read that and was just so sweet and so supportive and everything, and so encouraging of me. So right from the get-go, when he did finally find out, he said, okay, if you're going to do this, you're going to do this. You can't just say, if we're out to dinner, you can't just say, oh, I'm not doing it anymore, I'm going to have wine with dinner. Like, if you're going to do this, I'm going to hold you to it. That was our agreement. And that was such a gift, because I really think that I just kept blowing it off in the past. And on any given day, he didn't know if I was an on day or an off day, or I kept saying I was going to quit and I didn't. And so he really held me to it, and that was great. So his support and encouragement was wonderful. So my children are grown and married, and they it's just part of our life. Like, they're all normies, and but nobody really drinks very much at all in our family, so I'm not around it very much. And if there's something, I don't know, if maybe if we're having a family gathering or something and someone brings a bottle of wine, and it gets left out, I'll say to one of the kids, can you get that out of here for me? And they understand. They will take it home with them. Or I had a baby shower or a wedding shower for one of my daughter-in-laws, and I said to the other daughter-in-law, she was organizing it, and they were using my house, and I said, I just would like you to be in charge of alcohol. If you're going to serve it, you have to be in charge of it. I don't want to touch it, see it, clean it up, and you cannot leave any here. And she was so great about it. So they just are respectful and supportive and understanding. And my son, my youngest son, he's was only 14 when I quit drinking, and I had told him about it and how I had this blog and how sometimes people wrote to me and I would write them back, but they didn't know who I was, and he said, oh, you're like Superman, you have this secret identity, it's like your superpower. And now he's married and he's trying to get into med school. So I am just really, I think of the how much it means to me that he grew up seeing his mom in that way, and that they didn't have to live with a lot of the consequences of my drinking, but they lived with the unseen forces of it, right? The anxiety and the unsettledness, and I think that the mom can really set the temperature in the home, and I was setting quite a frantic temperature in their childhood home. So they now see this spirit of peace about me that I think is, I'm really proud of that. I'm the matriarch of our family, and they know they can call me any hour of the day or night, and I'll be there. And uh, um, I'm not inclined to be moody. I'm not inclined to be flighty. I'm not unpredictable. I'm just really grounded and solid. And so I mostly, one of the big factors when I quit drinking was that I knew my oldest son had just gotten married, and I knew that grandchildren would be arriving at some point. And I thought, oh boy, if anyone knew how much I drank, they would never leave a baby with me. No, no one should leave a baby with me. And that was a big motivation to quit drinking. And I'm so proud to not just be a good grandma, but to know that they really can trust me and they don't have to worry about that. So that's really wonderful. So yeah, what my life looks like now is lots of personal growth. I do lots of creativity based things. I make jewelry, I paint, I write poetry. I record a podcast every week. You guys know how much work that is.
Yeah.
And then there's always a lot of follow up with that. There's a lot of outreach as a result of that. So I spend a lot of time helping people connect with help in their community or online. And I just have a really full life. And I do have a job. We have a little business. And so I do have to do bookkeeping. And I hate it so much that it's like this, it's a little postage stamp of thing that I don't like in my life is this responsible bookkeeping that I have to do. The rest of my life, I've just painted it in colors that I love and that I'm living my life the way I really, really want to.
That's so beautiful. Is there anything you do, like a daily practice or ritual, or anything you've learned along the way that you really bring into your day now that helps you stay grounded and keep that feeling? Because I know it's so easy to kind of slip backwards. It takes a lot of time to build that foundation. So is there anything that you know that you're doing daily that really helps you?
There is, but I'll qualify it by saying that there's probably got to be like a time disclaimer, put a little ticker tape across the bottom that's like, this is time sensitive, because whatever I do, it evolves, right? So currently, the most important practice that I do is something called morning pages, where you get up and before you look at the news or do anything else, you open a scribbler and you handwrite 3 pages. And it's really a process of cleaning the cobwebs out of your mind. And what I then do with those pages is I shred them. I don't keep them. They're not for anyone else to read. And this is completely foreign to me. It was such a freeing practice when I started to do it because anyone that identifies as a people pleaser, do this. Write out something you know no one is ever going to read. Because I used to write journals and keep notes on the off chance that someday, I would be like Anne Frank and someone would publish my diary, right? I mean, that's how I used to write diaries. Not necessarily what was true, but what I wanted to be reflected about my life. These pages are just like, blah. They are the stuff that, you know how sometimes if oh gosh, maybe someone irritates you with something they've said and it keeps replaying in your mind and you keep thinking about it. Well, I'll put that on that page and get it out of my mind. And no one has to ever know I thought about it. And then I shred it and it's gone. So I do that. And I also use those pages for setting intentions every day. And I find that that really helps me get the things done that I want to get done. It's particularly helpful as we record this now. Of course, we're all in our own homes and feeling very isolated, and it's easy to feel like you don't want to do too much. So I kind of set what I want my day to look like. But then, like I said, I don't go back to it. It's okay that I'm not going to get a score on that at the end of the day, whether or not I did it all. It just gets me set up in my frame of mind. So it's sort of a way to sweep out the cobwebs and then set an intention for the day. So I really enjoy that. And then I have coffee and read in the morning. And I usually try to read something that's personal growth and then some fiction. And I write a little every day or do something creative, write, paint, or make jewelry or just something creative.
I am loving the shredding. I am, just keeping an open mind, a big part of, recovery journaling. I mean, how often do we hear that in our support groups and hear from our friends, when you're going through stuff, write it out, which I do a lot of, but I love the idea of shredding that. We're going to shred that shit.
It feels so good. It feels so good. And like, do keep another journal of things you want to remember, right? Keep a journal for posterity if that's important to you, or write down little special things. And it's even okay to keep the Anne Frank type journal of, you know, the polished and glorious story of my life that that I want you all to remember me as. I mean, they're going to remember the truth about us anyway. But so I actually have a few different scribblers that I carry around the house with me all day. And one is my morning pages, one is for poetry. And then I have another book, I actually keep losing it, that is my like journal. And that I find I'm not as regular with it. But of course I have my blog, and I have other things that I can look back on. So yeah, shred that baby. It feels really good.
That's awesome. Well, let's talk about the podcast, because you said there was a story there. I'd love to hear it.
Yes.
Okay, so I was listening to that podcast. It helped me get sober. Found I found there were some speaker tapes online, and then somehow I stumbled across this Bubble Hour podcast of these three lovely women talking about recovery. And they became my imaginary friends, and I would walk my dogs for hours, you know, the witching hour after supper or before supper, or whatever, that sort of 4 o'clock to bedtime. I would take my poor little dogs, their legs were probably an inch shorter after the first year because I walked them so much. And I would listen to this Bubble Hour podcast. And I loved it so much. And then one day, I was listening to it as I was putting my makeup on in the morning, and one of the hosts said that she had decided to step down from the show. And I literally went from like putting on my makeup, I just set my mascara down, I walked down the hall to my computer, typed an email to them and said, my name is Jean. I'm a blogger. My blog is called Unpickled, and I have a bit of a background in radio and TV. So I hear you're down a host. I'm all the way in Canada, but I can help you if you need help, if you need backup. Just know that I'm available if you need me. Send. And I went back to putting on my makeup. And then I thought, what have I done? Like, what have I done? I don't know these people. They don't know me. Like, what was I thinking? But it was just one of those, like, something just came over me, and I went and did that. And so then what happened was that the girl who was leaving the show had actually read my blog and really appreciated my work and knew who I was. And she said to the other hosts, you should talk to this girl. You know, she would be a possible fit, so you should talk to her. And then I didn't hear back from them, though. I didn't know that had happened. And then I did get a call a few weeks later. I was going to be leaving for Cuba for a destination wedding the next day. And I had in my suitcase the book Drink by Ann Dowsett Johnson. I don't know if you have read that book. Fantastic book, Canadian author. It's an exploration of women and alcohol. And so I had that book in my suitcase for this trip to Cuba. And the phone rang, and it had a Boston number on it. And it said Amanda F., who was one of the hosts of this podcast. And I'm like, oh my God. I'm just looking at the phone thinking, do I answer this? This is Amanda from the podcast. I knew it was her. And she's got this fantastic Boston accent that I cannot even pretend to try to do, but I wish I could. Anyway, she said, we have an emergency. One of the other hosts, so one host had left, the other host unfortunately had relapsed and was gone into emergency care. And she had been dealing with this whole fiasco and realized Ann Dowsett Johnson, the author of the book Drink, was booked for the next day to be the guest. And so she said, I don't know, I hear you have some experience, you might know what to do. Do you think you could interview this guest for me tomorrow? And I was like, you know what? I'm leaving for Cuba tomorrow, and I have that book. I will stay up all night and read the book, and I will interview her before I leave for my trip. And so that's what I did. I stayed up all night. I read that book cover to cover. I interviewed the author the next day, and that was in 2013, I think, and I've been on that podcast ever since. So it was amazing. And the happy news is the host that had gone into treatment, she really came out stronger and better and went on to do some really amazing work. And she did return to the show for a while and then decided that her recovery really needed her to stay out of the spotlight. And so she did leave the show. But it was just so amazing to, I don't know, I feel that something had really come over me and caused me to go and send that email and throw my name out there, because it just, so many things just aligned. And then yeah, there was just a lot of affirmations from the universe that it was where I was meant to be, and it's just been really amazing.
I love those God shots. Like
Yeah.
holding the book of this person that you're supposed to be interviewing next to. That's crazy.
Yeah,
Oh,
yeah,
wow.
it was amazing.
Mm.
It wasn't the greatest interview. I mean, I was so tired. I'd like a do-over on that, but it felt really surreal the way that it all unfolded, and
Were you
I was
hooked
just
right
so
away?
grateful to have said yes to the universe. You know, this is the thing. I feel like our our addictions really put blinders on us so that all we can see is our drug of choice. And if we don't heal ourselves, then we just transfer that to, something else, our children or shopping or our romantic life or something, and we're just getting our fulfillment from that thing. And recovery lets us just broaden our scope and gives us this capacity to say yes to opportunities and to spot opportunities, right? And to believe in ourselves, to know that I'm worthy of trying this. I'm worthy of this opportunity that's coming my way. And so I think that's kind of my agreement, with my higher power, is like, you keep sending me stuff and I'll keep saying yes, and make sure you let me know when it's time to stop. That's the other thing. I don't want to keep doing this for ego's sake and do it long after it's run its course. I really think we also have to pay attention for the signs that it's time to step back too.
Mm. Great advice, and so wonderful to hear your journey, and it's just the yeses that we can say in our recovery, and the option of being able to say yes with confidence that we never had when we were in our drinking. I mean, these are types of things that are happening in your life, and the opportunity that there's no way. I mean, thinking back when in those drinking days that just trying to show up for a family dinner gathering used to bring panic and anxiety, like, what do you mean I have to commit for next Sunday at 4? What? Like, there's just not yeses coming out of out of us in our using and our drinking. But in recovery, just everything's open. The door
Mm-hmm.
is wide open for us to be used, and if we allow it, right? And just a great example of that.
I also feel that our addiction really leverages anything it can get its hands on. And so if you have apprehension about a family dinner, it's going to latch on to that and say, oh, yeah, that's going to be trouble. That's going to be bad. You're going to need a drink to get through that. You're going to, oh boy. And then if something goes wrong, well, your addiction loves to tell you that you deserved it or you didn't deserve it, or it just messes with it. And so being free of that is really clears up the landscape a lot, simplifies a lot of things, and puts us in charge.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
So
it's like
true.
almost impossible to be grateful even when good things do happen in addiction. It's like it's almost next to impossible to be grateful for what you have. And I found that's been a big shift in my recovery journey, has just been the amount of gratitude I can have for a day and for these little things and little moments in my life that I totally overlooked forever because I'm just so self-absorbed.
Mm-hmm,
Yeah.
mm-hmm.
That's where those journals come in handy as almost like prayer journals, writing down all the things that we're going through at the time. And I just love taking time and going away for a weekend and just cuddling up against, in the woods at this cabin. My father has a cabin, and just rereading some of the old journals, because it's true how many times and how much pains we go through in recovery, and we're just wanting to get through those moments, and then we write out about it, and then we get through it, but then all of a sudden it's on to the next thing. And
Mhm.
sometimes it's so important to just sit in the moments and reflect in a real healthy, positive way. Because reading back and seeing in our recovery journeys how, for me, I choose to call God uses myself and the people around. Um, like when I read back on those situations, it's pretty unreal how God has worked and how you can find gratitude in those situations when you can't find it. It's like, things are just terrible, terrible. And reading back in the journals can bring that back.
Yeah. And
Mm.
things work out. It's sometimes we look back on the things when we thought there's no possible good outcome for this. This is never going to work out okay. Nothing good will ever come of this. And then, by golly, the sun comes up the next day and it's just the problem is that much smaller and it fades into the distance behind us and we move on. And that's good to remember too, that, even the hard stuff that doesn't have an upside, it moves along and something else comes after.
Well, I find the beauty in it too is that it all gets used. Like nothing goes to waste. All that hurt and everything, you use it to help somebody else get through
Yeah.
their time. And usually, God, of my understanding, will bring people that have gone through what I've been through, and I'll be helping someone through something I went through like 2 years ago and didn't see a purpose in, and all of a sudden there's like a purpose for it. Like here it is, it's getting used, it's tied up nicely in a little bow, and there's meaning in it, even though it was an awful situation to have to go through. It's not going to waste.
I have to tell you, as a writer, I'm so glad I've had a lot of garbage happen in my life because I have a lot to draw on, and I do have I can tell a story and have a lot of compassion for other people because I understand what it's like to be terrible and lovable at the same time,
Mm.
you know, and you can realize how people really can do awful things. I mean, I think we've all done that. We've all done things where we're like, how can I do this? This is so terrible. And when you love yourself through that and you heal from it, then you have so much compassion. And when you are sitting with someone or holding space for someone who's just, beating themselves up, you can really tell them that they're okay and you mean it. You're not just trying to make them feel better, because you really can see the good in them.
That's so
Mm.
beautiful. So what's next? What's coming up for the Bubble Hour and for Unpickled and for Jean? What do you got going on? What's coming up?
Well, so the Bubble Hour, I'm continuing all through this year. I've got guests booked right through right through the year, so that will continue on as per usual. And people always just show up, so it's so great. So a lot of my guests are listeners who volunteer to tell their story as a way to celebrate their milestone, and they'll just email me and ask if they can be a guest, and they're always so surprised when I say, "Of course you can." And then they apologize that they don't have an interesting story. And I say, of course you do, because we know everybody does. And I also interview quite a number of authors. So I try to keep it about 2/3 are sort of everyday stories, and then 1/3 of my guests are authors and people that are sort of out there doing stuff in the industry. And writing wise, I'm right now working on a book of poetry about recovery, which might sound a little odd. I feel funny saying it because it kind of came out of nowhere. But I do have a background in music. So in 2008 and 2007, had released 2 albums of original music as a performing songwriter. And when I got sober, I stopped performing. I just something locked up in my throat, in my heart, and I just could not perform anymore. I just couldn't do it, and that has really never come back for me. But the
Yeah.
poetry and
Yeah.
songwriting are really the same. Yes, yet, yes. So I have been writing a lot of poetry, and I'm planning to release it this year. I think there will be a book probably by the end of the summer will be out. So keep an eye out for that. I'm writing a novel about recovery. And I am also writing another nonfiction book, Unpickled book. So I released a book at Christmas time of last year called The Unpickled Holiday Survival Guide. And it was one of those like divine downloads where I just wrote it in a very short amount of time and released it. And I'm so happy with it. It was just really a great little resource. And my goal is to do one of those at least a year, and just so that you could just have a little lineup on your shelf of different topics about recovery. I've just heard, I'm not an expert. I've just held space for so many people. And so I am not relaying any advice. I'm really just relaying the lessons that other people have shared and modeled in their stories, and trying to sort of take this body of work that's accumulated over the past decade and try to parcel it out in little meaningful bits. So yeah, those things are coming up. And something else is calling my heart lately, and that is that I'm really interested, I think, in my next chapter of life as I move on. I think I will be working, perhaps volunteering with hospice and volunteering in the hospitals. And I've really felt a calling towards working with people during the end of life process. And so I think I'll be feeling really drawn towards that in the next few years. So I'm doing some coursework on that and learning about that and discovering a part of myself that I, didn't know was there too.
That's amazing. Thank you so much for sharing that and giving everybody hope, and how, our purpose continues to be an open book. We don't know what's coming, and there's just so much excitement when we're living in recovery and being able to have those options today. And I'm excited. Now you got me all curious about your voice. I might start stalking you about this album. I love music, and music's a big part of my healing journey. Nothing's greater than listening to just the outside and the birds and the bees, but something's beautiful about a resonating voice that comes into my soul. I just love that. So maybe that might be your future. A recovery singer. That's what we need.
There are some people out there doing it, and they're doing a really great job of it. The funny thing is, I look back on those albums that were written and released when I was, in active addiction, really, definitely in active dysfunction. And it's funny how many recovery themes are in there that I didn't know were there. So in fact, the theme song to the Bubble Hour is a song called I Own It. And the lyrics are, I own it. I did that. I'm not proud, but that was me. When I face it, I take back a little dignity. And it's so funny that is, a theme song, and people write to me all the time and ask for the words to that song, or where can I hear that song? And I think, oh gosh, and here I wrote it when I was really suffering and didn't know that it was a song that would mean so much to myself and to others in time. So you just never know what seeds you're planting. You never know.
Oh, that's so cool. This has been amazing. Thank you so much, Jean. We really just adore you. I love your podcast, sweet. And I had tons of my friends in recovery all mentioning you and like, oh, have you heard Bubble Hour? When I told them I was starting a podcast. And so yeah, it's just so cool. So cool to see you.
Oh, that's so cool. That's really neat. I just, it's funny. I record right here in this room with these like dorky Radio Shack headsets, and I'm so jealous of all your cool equipment. But I sometimes find that aside from the stats that I see on the screen when I log on to the website to post it, it's just so nice when I actually get to see the people that are listening to it and to know that it really is reaching people. Because otherwise it's just a conversation that I'm having, a one-on-one conversation that's beautiful and enlightening and brilliant all on its own, and you kind of forget that then it flies out into the universe and connects all these people, and it's just so magical. There's just something really magical happening. So I'm honored to be here. Thank you for allowing me to be part of this, and thank you for what you're doing. It really, really matters.
Thank you guys so much for listening to this episode. We are thrilled to have you as a part of this community, and we are really trying to grow and reach more people. So there's a lot of ways you can get involved. One is going to our website. There's some really great resources there.
Yes. And the most exciting part is checking out those GIFs. Or what do you call them?
GIFs. I call them GIFs. You call them GIFs, whatever. Tomato, tomato.
So when you're actually enjoying your sober life and you're going and you're posting on your Instagram, please just go to Seek Purpose and check them all out and tag us. Yeah. I want to see what you guys are doing out there in sober life.
Yeah, we also have filters actually we've been putting out as well. There's so much you can do through social media with Seek Purpose, like, comment, share, all of our posts. Really get involved with this community. There's so much help out there for you and so much connection here we've been finding.
Yeah, and the one thing that we have learned in recovery is asking for help. So we're going to ask for help and just become a patron and come help be a part of this community and help it grow. And we'd love to have you.
If you want to become a patron, we have a link on our website that you can click, and there's some really cool perks of becoming a patron with Seek Purpose. So we hope you check that out. And obviously, if you review this podcast on whatever podcasting app you're listening to, it's going to help us reach more ears and get that message out of recovery.
Stay tuned. We have so much more in store. And as our little community grows, our collective, there's exciting things that are happening that are coming out that we can't wait for you to be involved with. So stay tuned and stay connected.